All right, let's get right into it. We are talking about Oscar Wilde's incredible novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray. It's that classic story about a man who, well, basically sells his soul to stay young forever. And all the while, this portrait, this painting of him, it takes on the hideous weight of all his sins. It's a truly timeless Gothic tale about beauty, pleasure, and the terrifying darkness that can hide just behind a perfect face.
So Wilde himself kicks things off with this bombshell of a line right in the novel's preface. All art is quite useless. I mean, what a thing to say, right? It's totally a provocation, and it just perfectly sets the stage for a story where art becomes, well, the exact opposite of useless. In fact, for our main character, a single piece of art is about to become the most terrifying and the most important thing in his entire world.
So how does it all start? Well, it begins in this sun-drenched London art studio. We've got three men whose lives are about to get all tangled up in a supernatural bargain, and it all kicks off with a simple stroke of a paintbrush.
Okay, so to really get what's going on, you have to understand the three key players here. First, there's Dorian Gray himself. He's the muse, just this stunningly beautiful, innocent young man. Then you've got Basil Hallward, the artist who is just completely obsessed with Dorian's perfection. And finally, there's Lord Henry. He's the tempter. He's this witty aristocrat who looks at Dorian's innocence and doesn't see something to protect, but a blank canvas for his own, well, his own dangerous ideas. It is an absolute perfect storm of influence, art, and temptation.
So Basil, the artist, he pours everything into this painting. He literally tells Lord Henry that Dorian's personality has taken over his art, his soul, his whole being. He's convinced this portrait is the best thing he's ever done because, you see, it holds a secret, his complete and utter worship of Dorian Gray. So this isn't just paint on a canvas. For Basil, it's a piece of his own soul.
And then, this is the moment, the fateful moment. Dorian sees the finished portrait, and it hits him for the very first time, the tragedy of his own beauty. See, Lord Henry has just been whispering in his ear about how quickly youth fades, and in a total moment of panic, Dorian blurts out this desperate wish. What if the picture could grow old, and he could stay young forever? He just says it, and he has no idea, but some dark power out there in the universe hears him and says, "Done."
So, the wish has been made, the curse is in place, and now the stage is perfectly set for Dorian's corruption. And the main guy pulling the strings? That would be Lord Henry, who's about to preach a whole new philosophy to Dorian. Let's call it the Gospel of Pleasure.
I mean, listen to this. Lord Henry's philosophy, it sounds so alluring, doesn't it? He basically argues that following society's rules, being moral, is a betrayal of who you really are. He tells Dorian that the highest duty you have is to yourself. It's a total invitation to just cast off all restraint. And this is the fear that he just sinks his teeth into. Lord Henry paints this absolutely terrifying picture of getting old. Your senses rotting away, your body failing. He hammers it home to Dorian. Youth is the only thing worth having. He plants the seed of pure terror, and that's what makes Dorian's wish so desperate. And it's what makes Lord Henry's whole seize-the-day philosophy seem like the only logical choice.
So here's the real trick, right? It's how Lord Henry completely reframes morality. He just dismisses being good as boring, as conventional. But sin, now that, he suggests, is what gives life its color, its excitement, its vibrancy. He basically makes breaking the rules seem not just fun, but like artistically necessary if you want to live a full life.
And what this all boils down to is something the novel calls the new hedonism. It's basically a life that's totally dedicated to the senses, chasing every new passion, every new sensation, no matter what it costs. And this wasn't just some idea Lord Henry pulled out of thin air. It was a reflection of the real-life aesthetic movement happening in Wilde's time. You might have heard their motto, art for art's sake. The idea was that beauty and experience were the ultimate goals, way more important than boring old morality. But here's the key difference. For Lord Henry, this is all a fun, witty intellectual game. For Dorian Gray, who now thinks he's immune to consequences, it becomes a deadly serious blueprint for how he's going to live his life.
Okay, so Dorian has his new philosophy. And, well, it doesn't take long for it to be put to the test. And sadly, the very first casualty of this little experiment in hedonism is a young actress named Sybil Vane. So Dorian finds Sybil performing Shakespeare in this kind of dingy third-rate theater. But to him, her talent is so incredible, she's practically a goddess. He falls completely in love. But here's the catch. He's not in love with the real girl. He's in love with the artist, the person who brings all these tragic heroines to life. He even calls her Prince Charming, which tells you everything, right? He sees her as a fantasy, a character, not a person. So the night Dorian brings his friends, Basil and Lord Henry, to see her perform, Sybil is just over the moon. She tells him she's experienced real love for the first time, with him, and now all the fake emotions on stage just feel hollow. So she gives an absolutely terrible performance. And Dorian, he's horrified. He doesn't see a girl who's deeply in love, he sees a work of art that's been ruined. His rejection of her is just swift and incredibly brutal. Utterly devastated, Sybil Vane takes her own life. When Dorian gets home, he's still reeling, but maybe, just maybe, feeling a tiny flicker of remorse. And that's when he happens to glance at his portrait, and he sees something impossible. The bargain. It's real. And this is where the magic or the curse really kicks in. He can look in a mirror, and what does he see? His own perfect, youthful face, completely untouched. But the portrait, on the canvas, a subtle change has appeared. A new line, a touch of cruelty is now sneering around the lips. The painting has literally absorbed his sin. It's becoming a living, breathing record of his soul. Now, Dorian's first reaction is genuine horror. He actually wants to be good again. But then, of course, Lord Henry steps in and convinces him to see Sybil's death as just some beautiful, tragic story. So Dorian makes a choice, a terrible choice. He's going to live that life of pleasure, and he's going to let the portrait take the hit. And this is where a long, dark chapter of his life begins. And for the next 18 years, Dorian leads this insane double life. On the surface, he's the charming, fashionable, and weirdly youthful Mr. Gray. Everyone loves him. But in secret, he dives into every vice you can possibly imagine. He locks that hideous, decaying portrait away in a room upstairs and just gives himself over to sin, brawling with sailors, hanging out with thieves, losing himself in sordid opium dens, all of it. And through it all, his own face stays as pure and innocent as the day it was first painted. I mean, just stop and think about that for a second. 18 years. The people who knew him when he was a young man are now firmly middle-aged, and he hasn't aged a single day. His ageless beauty stops being this charming thing and starts to become, well, unnatural. It's terrifying. And it's almost like proof that all those horrific rumors swirling around him might actually be true. But you know a life like that can't last forever, right?
After all these years of sin with no consequences, Dorian is finally forced into a confrontation. Not just with his secrets, but with the very man who started this whole mess.
So, on this dark, foggy London night, who should run into Dorian but Basil Hallward, the painter? He's about to leave for Paris, but he just can't go without confronting Dorian about the awful stories he's heard. Stories about ruined lives, corrupted young men. He basically pleads with Dorian, saying, "I must see your soul," and he demands to see that portrait he painted all those years ago. And Dorian agrees. He leads Basil up to that locked room and rips the cover off the painting. Basil just stares at this hideous, leering, twisted creature on the canvas. He doesn't even recognize his own work at first. And as Basil starts to pray for Dorian's soul, this uncontrollable rage just fills Dorian up. He blames Basil for his fate, and in that moment, he grabs a knife and murders him, stabs him to death. He kills the one man who once saw him as good.
Killing Basil? That's the ultimate sin. Dorian has literally destroyed his creator, the last good influence he had left from his past. And now there is absolutely no turning back. The portrait is a monster, his life is a web of crime, and his only thought now is simple: destroy the evidence.
So he looks at this painting, this disgusting record of everything he's ever done wrong, and he just decides he's had enough. He wants to be free. And in his mind, if he can just destroy the canvas, he can destroy his conscience. He can erase his past and start over. So he takes the exact same knife he used to kill Basil and plunges it right into the painting.
But he got it completely wrong. The portrait was never just evidence. It was his soul. It was his life force. His servants hear this horrible crash and a cry. When they finally manage to break into the room, they see the magnificent portrait of their master, looking as beautiful and as young as the day it was painted, hanging on the wall. And on the floor is the body of a withered, wrinkled, loathsome old man with a knife in his heart. In trying to destroy the art, Dorian only destroyed himself. He finally broke the curse and made the man and his soul one and the same.